What's up, everybody? My name is Scott Paddock, and today we're going to talk about 5 different kinds of grace notes. Grace notes are little quick notes played before your target note used to accent your target note. I think of them almost more as articulations than notes. So when you see them written in music, it's the little tiny note that is written before the actual note. So you'll see them all the time. It's like a little note with a dash through it. That's letting you know that it is a grace note. And it is different from a normal note because it is not played in time. It is just a fast note, pretty much as fast as you can play it, into the target note. So on A, I will play just a regular grace note. This is your first grace note. So I always refer to them as blips because that's what it sounds like to me, as a blip. So the first grace note that we're going to talk about is the one note grace note. So you're going to come from a half step below. I'm going to play it on an A on the alto saxophone. So I'm going to come from a G sharp below, and I'm going to play a G sharp into an A. And that's a grace note. It's a pretty simple concept. There's not a lot to it, but there are several different kinds. So when you're trying to embellish a song or add something into a song, grace notes are a great way to do it. And if you know all 5 of the ones I'm going to show you today, it gives you a lot of options to choose from. So I'm going to use the song Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, just the first part of it, so you can hear these grace notes in action. So here is the beginning of Softly in a Morning Sunrise with no grace notes at all. Now here is the same song. I'm going to use the grace note on both A's. So I'm going to come from a G sharp below, and it's going to be a quick G sharp. It's not going to be a 16th note or even a 32nd note. It's not going to be in time. It's just going to be a quick note. I always say that the grace note belongs to the target note. So it's just a note right before it. So all that does is accent your goal note, your target note. So we're just using an extra note to add more importance to the target note. Now, that's our single grace note. The next one is the double grace note, which obviously would just be playing 2 half steps below. So instead of just playing G sharp into A, I'm going to play G, G sharp into A. Again, they're not in time. They're just fast notes right before the note. Now we use the double just to add more emphasis to it, just to make it sound stronger. So here is Softly in a Morning Sunrise with the double grace note. So I'm going to do it 3 ways. No grace note, 1 grace note, and the double grace note. Single grace note. Double grace note. So you can hear the difference between the 3. With the double grace note, I think it sounds good to start the song with that, but the one in the middle just kind of seems a little forced. That sounds a little weird to me, but I'm just showing you the double grace note so you can hear how it sounds. I think it sounds great to start the note though. So now, obviously the next one is going to be the triple grace note. So we're going to start 3 half steps below. So we're going to play F sharp, G, G sharp, into the A. Again, the A is the target note. The F sharp, G, G sharp are just fast notes before the target note. The target note always lands where it's written in the music or where you want to play it. These notes are just before it. So here is your triple. Again, the middle one sounds a little contrived. It sounds a little forced, but the first one sounds good. So that is your triple grace note. Now, the next grace note is more of a glissando. We're going to slide in to the first note. So it's not really a grace note, but it functions the same way. So I throw it in the same category. You can come from as low as you want. For me, I'm going to come from the 5th below. So I'm going to start on the E, and I'm going to go into the A. So I'm going to do chromatically from E to A. So I'm going to play E, F, F sharp, G, and G sharp as my grace notes, and A as my target notes. So here are the notes. So now I'm going to do it in time, and it's just going to sound like one thing right before the A. It's just going to sound like a little run into the A, glissando into the A, or lots of grace notes into the A. So the first time I'm doing it from the E, the second time I'm doing it from the D because that's the note I'm on. And with this grace note concept, you can just start on whatever note you're on and then rip into the top note. I also call it rips. That's what I usually call it with my students. I'll say rip into that note. That means start at least a fourth or fifth away and slide into that note. Now, what is going to make this sound better when you're ripping into the note is if you scoop your way up. So as opposed to just going, which is normal, if you scoop it, it's going to sound way better. In slow motion. So when you scoop, you're bringing your tongue down and getting behind the pitch, below the pitch, and pushing it up, and then hitting it in tune when you hit the target note. Here it is in time again. So let's take a listen to Softly as a Morning Sunrise with the 4 types of grace notes that we know so far. Actually, we're going to do it the first time with no grace note at all. Now with a single grace note. Now with a double grace note. Now with a triple grace note. Now with the rip ahead of it. So we're going to start on the E and go up to the A, and the second time we're going to start on the D and go up to the A and do a scoop going into it. Now, when you're doing grace notes, unless it's written, you always want to do it chromatically. So when I started on the E, I went chromatic from the E all the way up to the A. When I started on the triple grace note, I started on the F sharp, and I went chromatic, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. You always want to do it chromatic unless it's written in the music differently. And when you're doing it, when you're ad-libbing, you definitely want to do it with a half step. Except for grace note number 5. Which I've never really heard other people talk about this style of grace note. I don't even know if it is a grace note, but it kind of functions that way. I call it a THWOP. THWOP, a THWOP. And I call it a THWOP because it sounds like a THWOP. That's what it sounds like. And when I do a THWOP kind of grace note, I'm using the power of a large interval jump to get to my target note. So I'm going to clip the very, very, very end of the lower note and go into my stronger note. Take a listen to it. I'm gonna play my A with a THWOP in front of it. So I'm playing that from an E, I'm fingering an E, and then I'm going to the A, and I'm not letting hardly any sound come out of the E. You almost hear it as I switch to the A, so you get the power on the A without the extra notes. So here is the A without anything. And now here it is with a THWOP on it, and it's going to sound way more powerful. So I'm going from an E to an A. These THWOP notes can make any note sound way more powerful. So most of the time you're going to use them when you're starting a note or you're playing a note by itself that you really want to bring power to. The THWOP does it. So you don't necessarily have to start from a fourth below or fifth below. It can be from any lower note, pretty much anything lower than a third, and it's going to give you power. Just because you're going to catch the tail end of it. So you're going to get a little bit of that lower note and then the lower interval, and then you're going to get all of your power on that target note, and you're going to tongue it hard. You can do it on any note. I'm going to do it on a C. So I'm going to jump from a G to a C. I'm going to do it on a B. I'll jump from an E. I'm going to do it from a G. I'll come from a D. Obviously, that one didn't sound too good. So another thing about a THWOP is you have to really think about the fingering that you're coming from. Because you're going so quickly from the one note to the other, and it's such a large interval, you have to use fingerings that make sense and that are easy to go back and forth between. And you're not really getting any sound from the lower note, so it doesn't necessarily matter what note you're doing it from. It doesn't have to be a third or a fifth or a chord tone or anything. It just has to be a note before it that's going to give you that power. Here is Softly in a Morning Sunrise, played with no grace note, with a single grace note, a double grace note, a triple grace note, a rip, and a THWOP. So here is nothing. Here is your single grace note. Here is your double grace note. Here is your triple grace note. Here is your rip. And here is your THWOP. So those are your 5 different kinds of grace notes. So where can you use them? You can use them anywhere. They are great embellishments. But just like a scoop, you don't want to overuse it. If you grace note everything, then it loses all of its power. So you want to use it sparingly. And since you have 5 to choose from, you can do it so that it sounds different every time. Like if I was going to play Softly in a Morning Sunrise and I wanted to use different ones, and there I used at least 4 different kinds of grace notes. I used the single grace note, the rip, and the THWOP, and I also used the triple. So those are your 5 different kinds of grace notes. The single, the double, the triple, the rip, and the THWOP. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. I really appreciate it. If you now understand your 5 different kinds of grace notes and are able to use them in your songs, I'd really appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thanks a lot.